900 years, heresy sown. Truth was twisted, its seeds were grown. Break the lies, spark the mission. Welcome to Quranic Inquisition.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Peace of the Lord to all of you. Shalom, assalamu alaikum, namaste. Kash and I were back with another show talking about these Quranic problems and trying to figure out the Quran. How are you doing, Kash?
I'm doing well, JC. How are you?
I'm very, very well. And today the presentation is going to be by the one and only John, who is going to tell us a little bit about himself and what his research has been, what his research actually covers. Before that, I'll explain, we had another friend, his name is Shai, on the show a few days ago, and he will come back when he has the time, speaking about some apocryphal stories that appear in the Quran. Most people, as I did, would have heard about the pseudo-gospels and the sleepers in the cave being in the Quran, being borrowed, but pretty much that's about it. Then there will be people saying, oh, well, they copied from the Talmud and so on. So Shai finds those stories from the Talmud, apocryphal legends, and say, hey, they borrowed that from that source. Now, when we think about the history of the Quran and how it became this one book, we realize that, hang on a minute, if they borrowed from all of those sources, certainly they should have borrowed from the main source, which is the Bible. Yet when you are going through the Quran, it seems to contradict the Bible with saying that Jesus was not crucified and so on. So there is a bit of a problem there. Now, what John does is he's realized that no, the Quran must have borrowed from the Bible, and there are many verses that can be understood only if you actually look at the Bible. And of course, so we have on the one side Shai finding all of these stories where that the Quranic authors borrowed. Now we have John, who is actually looking at the borrowings, which would happen to be about the Bible, about the Trinity, and so on. And Kash and I, who are looking at, hang on a minute, how did they hide the meaning so that people would think that Jesus was not crucified and so on and so forth, when the book is very clearly Trinitarian, as we have shown in many other shows. So with that in mind, it looks like there are all of these different moving pieces and everyone's work contributes to everybody else. So with that in mind, John is here with us to actually talk to us about his research and how there is a lot of Bible in the Quran, surprisingly. Hi, John. How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Oh, g'day, mate. G'day from the land down under in Australia. It's an honour to be presenting my humble offerings. And yeah, what I find is, because I work in X-ray, I always like to see the deep things that are hidden. And so I really do see this as an extension of my passion to see the truth and yeah, just to put it out there. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing. And yeah, one of the thoughts that I've had going since, I guess, having conversations about Islam and Christianity is, what's really going on in this Quranic writing. What's its purpose, and yeah, how does it work? So I guess they always say, leave no stone unturned.
Indeed.
Yeah, and so for us, we're gonna. But I guess my modus operandi is being a recipient of, let's say, textus receptus. So we receive the texts as they are, and I'll look for those possible correlation, because my initial readings of the Quran is like, this is all over the place, and how do we make sense of it? What's the context? What is going on? To quote a famous Christian theologian, Don Carson, he said, a text without a context is a pretext for a proof text. And what we're finding is that, hang on, the way it's being used but by modern Islam today is, it's just proof texting. It's like, oh, this is what it means. And it's like, oh, just trust me, bro. The biggest trust me, bro. And then bracketology and all this, as you're finding in the RASM, the insertology. But yeah, it always makes me laugh. But I always got to say, well, what is it really for? If we know what the Quran is not about, then we've got to find out what's really going on in with the data we have, and it's truly for such a time as this that we're getting access to a real translation of the Arabic Quran, and yeah. So my endeavor is to really get to the bottom of it, and as best as we can, or at least make a good contribution. So what inspired this this format is, in the same way that when you pick up your iPhone or Android phone, there's always it looks beautiful on the outside, but you can see that there's circuitry on the inside. And so what I believe is that the Quranic writing as a whole is an apocryphal literature that has biblical themes and biblical theology woven throughout the text. And so, well, without further ado, any questions so far?
I had, from my side, an analogy, as in, like, this is a bit shameful to admit, but on the topic of you talking about how, like, a text without pretext, or text without context is just pretext for yada yada, right?
Proof text,
For proof text, exactly right. I missed that. So it's a bit shameful, but when I was a child, and this comes to mind, I would have these Pokemon cards, which are those, like, eyes that hover, incognito ones, right? And I had a deck full of them. And then I would engage in Pokemon card fights, which shamefully I would just pretend like this did this and this did this, and no one double checked, right? So I would just point at the card and say, yeah, if I have this one on the field already and I play this one, that activates this effect, and it's like it's all fabricated, right? But because the other person doesn't check it or doesn't know how to read it, you can get away with it. You can just tell people what the text means.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it says it because I say so. It's like, well, no, that's not how things work. Yeah, it's
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that is 1400 years of trust me, bro, no more.
Yep, that's it. We're putting we're going to we're gonna just combat it with the truth, and and the fact that part of that truth was for me what has inspired me to actually go into this and to look at this in depth is through all these people that are listed on this slide. What they've basically shown in a nutshell is that there really is no modern Islam or concept of modern Islam within the 7th century. And as you can see, these beautiful coins, I mean, wouldn't we just like love to have those? Man, how cool would it be to have that one at the top right, and to own one of those? Because, for me as a confessional Christian, I'll be like, that's not offensive to me at all. And yet this was essentially what was circulating around in the 7th century in what is today the Jerusalem and the Levant and Syria, so-called, according to Islamic history, was meant to be the greatest Islamic empire. And I'm like, how does this look Islamic at all? It looks basically Trinitarian, like Trinitarian Christianity. And so we basically have found that it's really changed the way I think about, conversing with our Muslim neighbors and possible family and or the people that we love. We're doing this out of love, and there's a new way we can engage, which is the historical critique. But what we're going to do is what I'm doing is rather than reinventing the wheel, I'm going to take their findings and move with it. So what we're going to do is, keeping this in mind, we're going to look at the Quranic text, the Quranic writing, that there is no Islam. So if there is no Islam, what is it? And this is the key thing. Anything before we move on? So I guess everyone here is very important, but Saint Murad, we're going to be using his work primarily throughout this series. Yeah.
Well, nothing from me, but said Murad, yes, certainly. I don't think there have been more than 1 or 2 shows where we haven't actually shown something from his work. We're still relying on him
Yes.
a lot, and it's just full of all of these Easter eggs that by looking at his
Oh
work, we can
yes.
actually find problems. He's just flagging them up by leaving the words in just how you would read them in Arabic or putting question marks. So it's phenomenal, and I look forward to see the verses that you are actually going to discuss, which I already know because I have seen the slides, so I don't want to,
Yep.
jump there. But yeah, looking forward to actually
Yeah.
seeing those.
John,
That's
a
it.
quick question before we continue.
Yes.
Actually, that's perfect. That it goes to this image here. When you see
Yes.
those coins with the 3 figures, does your mind go
Yes.
towards Trinitarianism necessarily, or could it be the 3
Well,
wise men, or could it,
that's
as
what I was
it,
thinking.
right? Because I
Yeah.
was thinking either the 3 wise men, or it's referring to the iconography of the Trinity sitting at the table. If you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
right?
the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's a
Could
big thing. Yeah.
could also be, of course, yeah.
Yeah. Because it's clearly 3 men, and yeah, and they all look well. It's hard to tell their age, but yeah, they would be essentially something important to do with the message on the reverse, which is it's a pretty odd. It actually looks like the Jerusalem cross. Yeah, but it's incredible. It's an incredible testament to essentially that Christianity was triumphing throughout the region. You know, it'd gone from 12 disciples to spreading in a phenomenally as we can see in the known world at the time of the 7th century. Yeah, and I think
So
there's a picture that I've got. Yeah.
At the time, it's fair to say that the Christian world was this region, right?
It extended, as you'll see below, and what I think the Quranic literature is celebrating is it's actually gone beyond that.
Yes.
It's really amazing. And there's actually one thing I think that I need to add as well is, given that it's in the 7th century, we actually tend to forget that there was no split in the church. There was no Catholics, there were no Protestants, there were no Orthodox. There was just Trinitarian Christianity was the mainstream Christianity at that time. So this is a very important thing that we. I think it's easy to forget when we read the Quran as apocrypha. There is no known major division within the Christian church, the Trinitarian Christian church at this point in time. Because that only happens like 300 years later. So if we grant that, and it's in the 7th century, it's referring to things in the 7th century, or it's locked to the 7th century community, then Trinitarian Christianity is the main thing. So I think I've already said about basically what this mission that I've got, but what has really springboarded this is that there's a new way of engaging with Muslims in a loving way. It's like, because I really take my hats off to apologists like David Wood, the Apostate Prophet, AP, CP, Christian Prince, and Rob Christian. And by all means, I encourage everyone to support them in their mission. But their methodology is different. They use the standard Islamic narrative. They go into all those hadith and all those stories that I really want to wash my head. Because the last time I was listening to Rob Christian's live streams, you really want to not just have a shower, but you want to get baptized, because it's all the horrible stories of of their so-called Islamic prophet. But now, thanks to the work of the research that I've just referenced before, we have a new way of going, a new approach that it's easy to then and safer to have this sort of discussion, because Jay Smith says it's not disrespectful. It's just saying we don't believe that this Muhammad existed, this prophet Muhammad existed. We believe the Quran is referring to something else. And for me, what inspires me is that this picture of Jesus, John the Baptist, and Mary, or Maryam in the Quran. And this picture actually is still there in Turkey, in that Hagia Sophia. So what we're doing is a mission to restore the truth. And and go a completely different approach. Yeah, it's amazing. It's overwhelming.
It's amazing. It's almost like this image of the Hagia Sophia is a perfect analogy. We can't, again, because it would be almost like figuring out what was removed.
Yes,
Or,
and how it was, how it was plastered over. It's but it's quite funny because even all those Muslims who go to pray in that Hagia Sophia, the Lord Jesus is looking down upon them and calling them to His mercy. So that's it. They can't fight against Him.
One thing I found quite hilarious, I really liked it when the apostate prophet then converted to Christianity, which we all could see it coming from a mile away. He was like pretty much there. And when he did it, and David would ask him, so what are you going to do now that you're a Christian? He says, well, I'm going to reconquer Constantinople. And he's like, yeah. So it sounds great. So just regarding the previous slide on this, the one with the coins, or the coins that we've seen before, the thing that really strikes me as odd is, hang on a minute, we have hadith saying that images were haram because of Muhammad, and that is in the hadith. And it's like, but clearly not. Look at these coins. The person would have introduced this compulsion of rejecting anything of the sort, like images and so on. That would have been Abdul Malik at the earliest. He's the first one that introduces a coin without images. So that tells us a little bit, it gives us a glimpse of how things were happening. Things are happening on the ground because of political reasons and so on. And then later on, everything becomes about Muhammad. So it's telling us a little bit of what was going on. And another comment is, I see, David Wood had a debate with Daniel Hagikachu the other day, and Daniel asked him something to do like with abrogation, and David Wood then said something like, okay, well, your concept of abrogation is that within your own book, Allah says something a little bit later and it abrogates something from before. So we don't believe in that, but we believe that the new covenant replaces the previous covenant and it has new rules. And I was feeling like, David, you are almost there. You've almost got it. When the Quran is talking about abrogation, it's not talking about Allah revealing commands in a period of 22 years. And if he reveals something in year number 19, it abrogates everything that came before it within the scripture. When the Quran talks about abrogation, it is literally saying you have a new covenant and most of the things from the old covenant stands, but you have a new one. That is what it means, abrogation. Hence why the Quran says we don't replace a sign, we don't forget a sign, we replace it with something better. And it's like, yes, because the Quran is not talking about Islam. It's talking about Judaism and Christianity exclusively. So I saw that and I was like, David, you're almost there. Join the final dot. So
do it. Make the jump, the quantum jump. And you never go back. Because, man, abrogation. And that's a funny thing is because it really injures the, they shoot them, Muslims who keep bringing up this abrogation and their Islamic interpretation, they shoot themselves in the foot because they're saying it abrogates Christianity. And I actually remember this because I'll share a bit later about my sort of conversations I had back in the old days when I was in uni. But, okay, so hang on, they're saying that this is all corrupted and stuff. They have to know what they're abrogating. So they have to know what the Bible says in the first place to know to then have their convenient Islamic interpretation of the Quran. So every time they have to reference the Bible and turn back to the Bible, it's game over. You keep saying that that Islam is like the truth, and I'm like, but your definitions have to come from us. So it just makes me laugh when I reflect on that. Yeah, it's it's really like trying to defend a mess, and it's quite funny because
it's like when they Muslims call people pagans.
Yes.
It's like, okay, do you know what that word means? Do you know what that word means?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Pagans and polytheists. It's so funny. It's absolutely hilarious. And because I had a very good friend in my uni course. And I remember what he told me. He's like, I'll tell him the beautiful truth in the Bible, about Jesus, the forgiveness of sins, the compassion, and that it's a gift of grace. And then he'd be like, oh yeah, of course. As Muslims, we we agree with that. But then he distinctly said Allah changes his mind and wants to change for religion. And then his reasoning was that at the time of in the 6th century, people were abusing grace and being licentious, so they needed to be they needed punishment. I'm like, now that I think about it, I'm like, that's a very interesting thing to say. So abrogating mercy and at the same time claiming the Islamic Allah is merciful. It's just funny, isn't it? But yeah, so that's I guess. Oh, and I guess before I move on, it's interesting because there was a lot of Saudis that came to that did my course. They were from overseas, and it was really interesting just talking to them about sharing the gospel in the best way I could. But they would always say, they'd always be proud of, that they understand Arabic and that the historical evidence is where they grew up. They grew up seeing all the, Islamic historical artifacts and stuff, and they'll boast about that. That they live near Mecca and all that sort of thing. But yeah, now we've got something that we can respond with, because especially at that time there wasn't much resources, 15 years ago. So, what do you say to someone who's like, "Oh, yeah, I know Arabic. Trust me, it's all true." But yeah, now we've got a different approach.
Well,
and
that's an
it
interesting,
truly is such a time as this. Yeah.
That's an interesting comment, because they don't actually have any artifacts. That's kind of the whole point. When we had
Yes.
this show, the one that the thumbnail is with Jay Smith and Raymond Ibrahim. So on that one, actually, we showed at the very end, like, look, we've looked at the records of what they have in the museums. The only things that they say that they go to all the way to the time of Muhammad is a piece of wood and a piece of stone and another stone. And he's like, no, they don't have any artifacts. They don't really have anything. Everything else is like pretty much from the Ottomans. So I find it odd because they say, oh yeah, we have all of these artifacts. I say, no, you don't. They are not in the museum. They don't exist. So it's interesting, but hey ho, that's a different conversation.
They have all these artifacts the same way that they have one Quran. And this is the thing, it's like when you brought up the idea of like, how do you engage with Muslims on these ideas, right? Like one experience I had recently was where I'm like, okay, I have to actually go into a conversation to explain to someone, hey, there's actually not only one Quran, just so you know, right? Because they were under the impression that there was only one, right? So if the actual like state of affairs right now is we have to even explain that their belief that there's only one of their text, right? Something as foundation and surface level as that, right? Like how are we then going to step into, oh, and by the way, this Muhammad word doesn't mean that. That's made up this. Like, how do you get there? Like, we're like at stage -10, explaining that they don't have one book, right? But we do have to figure out an approach. We have to figure out how can we lovingly express this material to a Muslim audience.
Exactly. How do we lovingly engage? Because that's what we want to do. We're not here to have polemics where we just go attack in a malicious way. No, we do this out of love. We want to be reasoning. It's about coming and having a dialogue, a discussion, and pointing to something better and bigger and better. But I guess what I guess I really know what the Dara script is, because it really hasn't changed in 15 years or 20 years. It really hasn't. The Dara script is the same old.
The Dawah script has not changed much since for like 1,000 years. If you read the accounts of like Al-Kindi, there is a lot of stuff that he's going to write in there that is the same things that they're using right now, like the same things, word for word. So if you wanted to say, okay, so I want to become an apologist, how do I do it? It's like, well, if you read Al-Kindi, you're going to be like 80% there, because most of the arguments, they were already put forward back then, and now it's been over 1,000 years, and they're still using exactly the same lines. And so it is ancient. I mean, there are many things that they are new, and so on. But if you read the ancient apologist, you are going to see that it is almost everything that Christian apologists are saying to this day. Of course, these guys back in the day, they didn't have the internet. So we have a huge, huge advantage. So that's phenomenal.
It is. Praise God. Yeah. And so, basically, what underpins this thesis is that because there is no we're going to take for granted that there is no modern Islam going on. So you really got to shut down that voice and then the Quran will be more coherent. Because if we just give some grace and say, which is quite funny, that's what Daniel Hakijiri said to David, we'll have some grace. But there you go. There is no clear definitions within modern Islamic interpretation, because they don't even there's no explanation using the Quran. There's no explanation of what the Messiah means. You just don't get any. It assumes you know what a Messiah is, about what's the meaning of Messiah. And I mean, that was one big thing. And there's very little definitions throughout the Quranic text. It doesn't stop to teach you what it is or what's what. And there's also no coherency and consistency within the modern tafsirs. I mean, if you want a laugh, and I'd say that as a laugh, is like Lloyd de Jong and Osama Dakdok. They do live streams, and they basically try to use read the Quran through the Islamic interpretation of, like, for example, the story of Joseph, and it's just hilarious because what Osama Dakdok does is he collects the interpretations of the Islamic scholars, and they all contradict each other left, right, and center, and it's just very funny. So if you ever want some humor, you could always just go off and listen to them explain it. So this thesis is going to offer a more it's going to take the Quran at face value and look for what's really going on without any distractions of the hijaz and some prophet coming over. It's going to be using the Bible as the explanation.
Yeah, there is a particular thing about Usama's approach that I really like, which is he's very good at finding the stuff that sticks out because it's not there. Not many people do that. Most people, they really try to see what is there and then take it like that. But Usama is very good at seeing something in the Quran and says, okay, so this is what it says, that's that. But look, when you go to the tafsir writers and other scholars, they add a lot of detail. It's like, how did they get that information? It's not in the Quran, but these people know. In order for them to know, they need to actually pick up the Bible, pick up the Talmud. They are reading other sources because the Quran doesn't give those explanations. So I really like the fact that Usama doesn't just take what is written, it actually looks at what the standard Islamic narrative actually says, and he realizes that there is a huge gap between the two, meaning those guys, the tafsir writers, they need to read other sources in order for them to begin to understand the Quran, which is what you, John, are actually doing with all of this, which is, hang on a minute, in order to understand the Quran, you have to go to other sources, which is what the tafsir writers did and what Usama actually is very, very good at explaining. So joining those dots tells us what did they know on day one, which is they were familiar with the stories, hence why the Quran is not really, doesn't explain things in detail. But by the time that we get much later and they're trying to push a narrative, they need to go to the original sources. And of course, they need to twist things, like the whole thing with Ishmael being the one that was going to be sacrificed and so on. And it's like early tafsir writers actually don't write that until at one point they say, okay, well, it was Ishmael. And it's like, no, that's not what you guys believed on day one. So that's actually very, very good.
Yeah, it is. And that's, exactly. And so what we're trying to do with this is we're going to be charitable and assume that the Quranic author had a clear intention, and it wasn't, he doesn't assume people are stupid, and and he wasn't illiterate, he wasn't drunk, okay, he wasn't hallucinating. But like there's got to be a coherency and a consistency. And I guess with my skills in X-ray, it's examining it to find out where the and propose that there is consistency using the Bible as the foundation. Because in the next slide, interestingly enough, we're going to just assume that as the Bible said, the Quran says, the Quranic text says, it's all confirming the biblical text or the biblical scriptures. We're going to find in our journey that in later episodes that it really does reference. It even uses the specific terms like the Torah, or the Torah, the Injil, the Gospels, and then sometimes it's vague. It says the writings. So it actually uses very specific terms that it doesn't even define. within the Quran or even within the Islamic tradition. There's no agreement. So we're just going to take it for granted that it's really confirming and the message of the 66 books in the Bible. So it's I always remember one thing that good old Sam Shamoon said. He once said this. He always emphasized that whenever you talk to Muslims, don't waste time defending the Bible. He says, don't defend the Bible because the Quran does it for you. And he was just saying, or he would say, Muhammad does it for you in the Quran. Well, I guess Sam Shamoon's recently started listening to Jay Smith, so I guess he's probably just going to change that to the Quran. Actually, the Quran is a Christian apologist. The Quran defends the Bible, and so that's just that's what you can see from. I'm trying to remember who that was from. It was from. I got this from Inspiring Philosophy, who got this slide from J and DOC, or J and Daughter, J Apologetics and Daughter of Christ. Another great channel, very worth supporting. But
when you say John, when you say like this is a Christian apologetic, is that maybe why the text itself doesn't have a term for Christians as such?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's assumed. It's so it goes back to the definition of apocrypha. It assumes that the audience is aware of what's going on, and there's that's why it doesn't use the word Christian, and actually there's some interesting things which I'll get to in later episodes when it talks about like Nasara and Judaizers. There's a lot going on in the 7th century, and I guess going on in that time period. So
absolutely,
yeah. And I think it also explains why everything's sort of coded and sort of cryptic. It's because it's for people who are in the know. I don't think so. What I reckon is that it assumes that you are a Bible nerd. It assumes that you're that you really know the nuances of biblical interpretation, and so it's not. It wasn't. I don't think it was ever really intended for the general public, because people will just get lost if they read it. Let's just say we think of the most obscure country, right? Where they've never heard of Islam, they've never heard of Christianity, and they read the Quran. What conclusion would they come to? It's not meant for beginners. It's meant for advanced, as Yasukadi says, students of knowledge. Well, students of knowledge of the Bible. Yeah.
Well, yes, but also one of the problems with the Quran is that it is very grossly mistranslated. Something like a mental exercise would be, okay, so if we were to translate the Quran perfectly, and then you find a Christian monk somewhere in the mountains who has never even heard about Islam or Muhammad, and you gave that book to him, he would read that book and say, oh yeah, so this is like a spin-off of the Bible. It's almost like what can I say, like a fan fiction. It's all about Jesus everywhere. The problem is that they have mistranslated so many things. This slide here shows very clearly anyone who were to read these verses, they would immediately know that the Quran is really confirming the Torah and the Injil. So it's supposed to be chapter 3. Of course, that then generates lots of other problems. But that's what they would read from here. Just like there is a verse in Surah 19 where they put words in the mouth of Jesus, when he says, "Peace is on me, the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I'm raised alive." Any Christian would read that and says, "Oh, look, it's Jesus confirming his death and resurrection." And everybody would understand that. But then is when you go to the standard Islamic narrative, and they have spent 1,200 years. It's not really 1,400, but 1,200 years saying, no, that's not what the very clear book says. It's not talking about his death and resurrection, because in that verse it says that he didn't die and the Christians are the enemy. The same happens with these ones. Anyone who read this, they know exactly what it means. The book is saying the Torah and the Injil, they are fine. This is what it's saying, is very clear. But then is the apologist having to say, no, that's not what it means. And the reason they say that is because Ibn Hazm in the 10th century realized that, hang on a minute, our book confirms what they have. That means we have a false religion because it contradicts everything from there. Okay, so their scriptures have to be corrupt. That comes from the 10th century from Ibn Hazm.
Yes.
So it has nothing to
Yes.
do with the scripture. The book says, as you have shown here, it confirms everything that came before it. And when you see debates like
Yes.
David Wood and Daniel Hagikachu, the apologists, the Muslim apologists, will just have to say, no, it doesn't, that is not what confirming means. It means like, okay, well, there is a little bit of a message in there or whatever. It's like, no, dude, it says confirming. This book was meant to be not a scripture, but just
Yeah.
a set of writings to say, hey, you know that this thing is saying that their scriptures are absolutely fine. And this is
Yeah.
just almost like a spin-off with additional stories. And they change that, but that is done through the standard Islamic narrative and apologetics. So I think this slide is incredibly clear. Well done for actually putting it here. It simply confirms what was before. So
Exactly. Yep. Amen. Amen to that. And yeah, so yeah, so it's pretty much like it's not designed to steal the show. I think that's what I got from what you're saying. You know, it's like when someone introduces a speaker, it's like, so here's the real deal. You know, the scriptures, and so. So I guess when we look in the methodology, I've sort of already covered it already, but look, it's to say, okay, there is no Islam for 200 years. So what was this all about? We're going to use typical biblical. We're going to take biblical exegesis, kind of like a Bible study, but we try to apply that same logic to the Quranic texts in question. Because one thing I wanted to talk about was that when we read the Bible, we read it in context. So to avoid proof texting and saying, you know, like, because, and I say this tongue in cheek, okay, like, it's like, oh, this Christian preacher talks about generosity, and then he's just twisting the Bible so that people will donate to his, you know, private yacht, and, you know, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about.
Yep.
You know, these false Christians that, you know, that are basically twisting the Bible to make it about them, and, you know, God wants you to be rich and all this stuff, you know, this prosperity stuff. It's because the thing is to read the Bible in truth, in its context. And it's easier to do that with the Bible because we know that the Psalms should not be read literally in the same way that you would read the Book of Kings, for example, that talk about the history of Israel's kings. And again, some things that are written through the scriptures is to be taken figuratively. So it's an allegory to demonstrate a point. For example, the Proverbs, the Psalms, what's called the wisdom literature. Those are designed for you to reflect back on what's taught in the Torah, like the first books of Moses, and also to look forward to hope, as we believe that it all points to Jesus as the Messiah. But it's hard to do that with the Quranic text, admittedly, because we don't know, you know, what genre, you know, because in the Bible we can see what genres there are. But and this is why I say the Quran is itself an apocrypha and given to advanced students who will know instinctively what should be taken figuratively and what should be taken literally or didactically. So yeah, that's what we're all sort of present and propose as a more a coherent and consistent way of looking at of approaching the Quranic text. Yeah. Does that all make sense? Hopefully, yeah. And so part of that will be the undergirding principle is that we're going to take chapter 3, verse 55, and chapter 9, verse 31, and there's a little bit of a bonus there as well. And I'm going to propose that that's going to be a big overarching theme of the Quranic text as a whole. Getting excited.
Always ready.
Excellent. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with a disclaimer. So I know that in the past there has been a lot of polemics about the name Isa, okay, the Arabic Quranic term Isa, and people were saying, like, you know, this is demonic because it's Yeshua spelled backwards, or it's, you know, it's a curse. So it's very similar to when people say, apparently people were saying like Yeshu instead of Yeshua. That was meant to be an insult and all these things. And Murad basically said, like, look, these might be true today, but it definitely wasn't back then in the 7th century. And we're going to take that. We're going to take this definition that I've got on the slide into further episodes. We're going to keep this the main definition, and we're going to assume, just like we're assuming that there is no Islam, we're going to assume that Isa means ransom, and that's very interesting because even the term savior in Arabic is halisan or halisa. So ransom or even redeem, these are very rich biblical scriptural understandings that you're only going to get through looking at both the Old and New Testament, the concept of ransom. And the concept of ransom as atonement, like that is, biblically speaking, aligning well with what Jesus himself says in Mark 10:45. So, yeah, if we, what do you guys reckon before we really connect the two together?
Well, I'm really interested in your where you're finding this word ransom. When I see Ahmed Abjad, I'm assuming you're looking at some Proto-Arabic inscriptions. That's pretty interesting.
Yes.
I'd love to see exactly the detailed case for that, because that's very cool.
Yeah, it does. And the funny thing is Ahmad al-Jalad is a confessional Muslim. He wants to try to give defense for Islam, but what he's finding is doing the opposite. He's helping us out, because he's found that the what do you call it? That inscription that very likely is the root for Isa. It's basically it dates to about the 4th century, so about the 300s AD. And it was like rock. They call it rock vandalism, where shepherds would go by and they'll carve an inscription in some of the rocks, and they basically call it a rock garden, right? Because there's all these rocks around, and they've got all these really old inscriptions, and it's older Arabic, like Safavitic or even Sabaic. But what's interesting is that inscription is found in Jordan, so it's nowhere near the Hijaz. It's basically within Jordan and very close to Israel and the Levant. And in later episodes, once I've gone through the theology, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through what I believe is the Quranic and biblical geography. That it connects, like who the people of Ishmael are, and what's really going on in the Quran. But going back to the main thing, this is the main thesis, that the ransom, Isa, is the fulfillment of the biblical of Scripture and of God's mission for the world. That's going to be a
quick question, John, before we continue.
Yes, of course.
I'm sure you're going to clarify. I'm just too impatient. So when it comes to the form Isa with the Y ending, is the idea that the ransom root is the first 3 consonants, and then the 4th consonant being the Ya is actually rendering it my ransom? Is that what we're looking at?
Yes. That's exactly what we're.
Okay.
That sums it up perfectly, because Ya is like oh, so it's like an invocation, like oh, my ransom.
Oh no! I was referring to the suffix aleph. So you have Ya ein sin, and then you have a Ya after that. So basically, my intuition was that we're looking at Ya ein sin as a root, with Ya being the rendering to make it my. And I was assuming maybe the Ya ein sin was ransom. Anyway, you take it from here. I won't spoil anything.
Definitely. Well, it's a good, excellent. And and I'll also get back to bin Mariam as well, and that how there's a very rich biblical understanding that I think I guess as Protestants, because I mean especially as a Protestant, we don't really, for me, I've never really had any engagement with apocryphal. It's just not part of our tradition, textual tradition. So the bin Mariam is going to be unpacked a little bit later in the slides, but essentially, it's the ransom. And when we see this, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And it's very interesting in the Murad translation we have, as Allah said, or as God the Father said, O ransom, surely I am fulfilling thee and raising thee unto me, and purifying from those who have covered. So the interesting thing is, without getting into to the later part yet, but the idea of fulfillment. So the word fulfilling, as Murad said, is actually a double entendre. So fulfilling means like fulfilling the life mission. So it's a very honourable way to say that this person has passed or died. So, for example, we would say the president has fulfilled his life, and yada yada yada. But also, there's a double entendre of like fulfillment of Scripture as well. So that it's God's idea and God's mission that Jesus give his life as a ransom to be fulfilled. And I think that's really beautiful, a very beautiful picture there. That it unequivocally says that he has died as the ransom of atonement. And I think the beautiful thing here is it says purifying, because like we already get that language from Isaiah 53, where it talks about the messianics, the biggest like in your face about Jesus, the suffering innocent servant who sprinkles the nations. And so that's really rich biblical imagery of purification. And I actually find that this fascinating when it talks about purifying thee from those who covered. And there's definitely got to be another episode dedicated to that word covered, because it's very multi-layered. But for Jesus to purify or take on the sins, biblically speaking, he takes it upon himself because he knew no sin, and therefore when Jesus is raised, Jesus is figuratively also purified because he doesn't keep the sins forever. So so in his death and fulfillment of as being a ransom, he himself purifies the people that he atones for, and is himself removing the sins for. I think it's a beautiful picture there. But in all this, we can't escape the fact that this is God's mission for Jesus as the ransom to accomplish the task that only he can do. Is that? Hopefully that's making sense. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, and this idea of Jesus being the sacrificial lamb and all this, right? I've also seen that elsewhere, where the word that they use in the Quran for created is actually the Hebrew word which means to pass over. So, like, yes. It's not that we were created from the blood of Christ. We all know as Christians, it's not that we were created from that blood, it's that we were redeemed through that blood, or we were passed over by means of that blood, right? So this terminology, it's clear to me that the Quranic authors viewed Christ as the Lamb. So that's for sure.
Exactly.
They saw him as the ransom for many, definitely.
That's it, exactly. And this language is impossible to escape. Raising thee unto myself. That's Jesus in the gospel saying, I return to the Father. I will ascend. So like this is very big biblical language about being raised. Fulfillment and the resurrection. That's and resurrection and ascension, should I add, to glorified, to sit at the right hand of God after, as the book of Hebrews says. See, it's so packed in there. It really has to. Apocrypha is abbreviating so much concept into one. You have to. It's just packed. This verse is really packed. It's big.
Yeah, but crucially, it's not inaccessible, right? Like we're giving a couple examples here. And it's thanks to the technology that we have access to and the hermeneutics that we're developing as a result of that. Like it's almost like a cross-feeding acceleration that's happening, where we have the ability now to even with the current state, 1400 years later, we actually still can get to the original meaning, which is really cool. And when we do it feels really cool because then you're reading some theologically deep text which loves Jesus, albeit in their own way, right?
Yes.
And it's cool to read. It's finally entertaining to read a text instead of only recite it, right?
Yes.
Like
exactly. It is, exactly. And so, credit to Saint Murad. But thanks. He really has put his life in danger to really serve us. Absolutely. Kudos and the greatest of honor to to brother Saint Murad. We really got to start saying, alayhi wasalam, upon him be peace and blessings for what he's doing.
Certainly Murad has actually chosen the correct word, even for these things. He certainly is the divine resource that we've been waiting for 1400 years. In terms of this verse, you're absolutely right. It is absolutely packed. At one point, I think I've created just a couple of post in the community section, and one of them was about this one. In the past, until about a year ago, if you were to take those words in there, the very beginning of verse 55, and put them on Google Translate, this would have been translated as Allah said, O Isa, surely I will cause you to die and raise you to myself. That's how it was translated until about a year ago. Fortunately, I actually have a screenshot of that. I've heard Sam Shimon speak about that as well. If you do that now, however, Google Translate is going to say something like, I will take you and raise you to myself, which is the Daif International. Now, this is fact. Any Christian who were to actually read this, they will understand immediately that it is Allah, the Father, saying, Isa, I am fulfilling thee. Your mission is complete. Now, nobody can kill you, hence why I have to basically remove you from the body, something along those lines, because like we have it in another verse, Surah 4, verse 171, when it says, the Jews say, we have killed the Messiah, Isa, the son of Miriam. And it's like, but they didn't kill him, they didn't crucify him. Yet you go everywhere else in the Quran, it keeps saying that he died and resurrected. Like in Surah 19, when it says, peace is on me, the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I'm raised alive. So it's very clear. Anyone who actually read that, they would actually, or they would have heard these words, they would understood that what is happening is God the Father saying, so you are done with your mission, which it ends in the crucifixion, because this is everywhere, is everywhere in the Quran. And then I'm taking thee to myself. In fact, about fulfilling the mission would probably involve him returning. Basically, this is after the resurrection. And then once everything is complete, then he goes. However, you go to Daif International, it will have to say, I will take you and raise you to myself. It's like, guys, that's actually not what it says like at all. I know that you are really trying very hard to hide the fact that the book acknowledged the death and resurrection everywhere in the book. And you're trying very hard, but it is actually very naughty. But another important thing about this verse is that if you just keep reading, I am fulfilling thee to myself and raising thee unto me. On big difference there in the words, but never mind. But look, I'm purifying thee from those who denied and rendering those who follow you, who followed thee, above those who have denied until and unto the day of standing straight, the day of resurrection, the day of judgment. Now, anyone who actually read that, they would think, okay, this is actually written by Christians. It's saying that those, the mission of Jesus was complete, and then he went up to the heavens, great. And those who followed him, so the apostles and everybody that actually heard the good news, they will be the uppermost until the day of judgment. And now, when then you look at the Islamic narrative, it says, no, he was not crucified. He didn't die. It was somebody else. And we are going to be the winners. And you are actually not even really following Isa. We are following Isa. And it's like, no, this thing is clearly telling you the Christians are going to be uppermost until the day of resurrection. They have this in their actual book. This is like, why would you actually go with a team that tells you that it's going to lose? It's just as simple as this. This says those who followed Isa after he was raised up to the heavens. So Muslims, despite of having that in their book, saying the Christians win this one 100%, and they're convincing them, no, that's not what the book says. They don't really follow Isa. They got everything wrong, and we are the ones following Isa, and that's why we are winning. And it's like, no, your book actually literally says the polar opposite. This is something quite annoying because it is very clearly in there, and in the translations, then they will try to really hide the meaning. But just read it, and that's why, like you said, Saint Murad is phenomenal because his translation is actually putting the words as they were there in the 7th century, and it is very clear. This is a Christian
Yeah.
statement, and they
Yes.
take it, they do the standard Islamic narrative interpretation of it and say, no, 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 we are the true believers. It's like, no, 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 just read your own book. Like, you don't have to go to the tafsirs. Read what your book actually says. So it's just a shame that the translation from Saint Murad didn't actually go as far as it should. It has actually reached tons of people, which is phenomenal. And we hope that more and more people will pick it up, and Saint Murad will have the opportunity to do a translation that will include things like words
Yeah,
borrowed
but
from Syriac,
yeah,
Hebrew, Ge'ez, and
yes.
things like that to give more of the meaning, because this was a very multicultural book. But we will see.
Yes.
For now, just as it is, it shows anyone what the book came from, or at least it really hints very heavily at that direction, and it was very, very Trinitarian. So this verse really gives the whole game away, and the standard Islamic narrative is created to tell people, no, 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 this is not what the verse says. Let me explain to you what it really says. Trust me, Ahi.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big cover up, and it's a bit of a pun because yeah, it's all about covering. You know, they had to cover up these inconvenient truths, and the inconvenient truth was who is Jesus the Messiah. Um, and yeah, so this is like part one is like the fulfilling, and then the other part I was going to look at is like rendering those who followed be above those who are covered. But I just wanted to drop a little comment, which I find very interesting, because I think that even that last part says, "So I shall judge between you in what you are variating in." I reckon that could be a hint that. So, well, I don't think that judge means like condemn. It's more of a judge, as in someone who assesses the quality. Because I think even in like biblical theology, like not all judgment means the same thing. There's actually a nuance with the meaning of like judgment. So I don't think it's like a condemnation, like I'm going to throw someone in hell. Like that's not that kind of judgment that it's talking about. It's more of like I will judge between you and what you are variating about, what you are in disagreement about, and it's clearly about Jesus. There were communities disagreeing about the specifics and probably getting into that. Maybe some were pointless arguments, or some were pretty serious arguments about the nature of Jesus. And what God promises is those who truly follow Jesus will be rendered uppermost. So I think it even elaborates on what it means for those who follow Jesus to be made who are rendered above those who deny the truth.
Yeah. And
But
also,
yes,
if
that's it.
all of this was translated verbatim by all of the translators, and they wrote things exactly as they are in the Arabic, you would say, okay, they are not embarrassed about this. They will have a story. But when you see what the Arabic says, and then you look at the translations and they tell a completely different story, and then you go to the tafsirs and they tell a very different story, and then you listen to the imams or their sheikhs and tell a very different story, it's like, guys, this thing, just like John, like you said before, is a huge cover up. It's like the book that you pretend to read is saying very different things to what all of the
Yes.
traditions are telling you. The book was something different. Hence why it seems
Yeah.
to be the weakest link in all of these sort of arguments is you just have to read it. It's right there. If they had nothing to fear, they would not hide anything. And the translators, when they do these sort of things, I am taking you and raise you to myself. And it's like, but that's actually not what it says. If you
Yeah.
need to be really loyal to the actual text and what it says. That's not what they are doing. So
Yep.
when they're hiding something, you, John, are using an X-ray machine, and Cash and I were using a shovel.
Yes, but we're working together. You've got to put them two together to, I guess, the X-rays to show where to dig to put the shovel through. And actually, I wasn't planning to talk about this, but like even verse 56 below, it's very significant. I guess it flows on from the theme of consistency, because it goes, as for those who deny, so God is promising those who deny Jesus, I shall torment them in intense torment in the one close by. So like I guess in daily life and the last one. And we actually note something. And there are no advocates for them. So it kind of makes sense. Like if you deny Jesus, who is the ransom and the one who by whom we know who God is, then to deny Jesus, there is no advocate. There's no help. There's really no help for you if you reject. You knowingly reject the truth of Jesus.
Yes,
it's very interesting.
and that's what the book actually said. So it said those who denied Jesus, well, they're going to be tormented. But then the standard Islamic narrative is created specifically to deny Jesus and to say, no, we've got the truth. Don't worry. It's like, no, hang on a minute. Your book literally says the polar opposite. Standard Islamic narrative is just really created to lead people astray. It's like you are welcome to believe whatever you want to believe, but you don't get the privilege of actually reading a book that says one thing and then believing the polar opposite and pointing at the book and says, no, that's what it says. It's like, no, that's not what it says. It says the polar opposite. So the whole thing is all over the place. These verses, they are very, very clearly still talking about that. Then, of course, they have to change the word, the deniers, those who deny Jesus, to, no, that means, well, maybe the polytheists, the mushrikun, or maybe the Jews, or maybe, he's like, no, this is you guys. No, we believe in Jesus. We, of course, believe in Jesus. It's like, no, you don't. You are denying, it's exactly the book is saying, denying Jesus. That means the sacrifice, as we have seen as well in other shows and stuff, is the standard Islamic narrative is developed and superimposed on a text that tells you one thing, that is all about Christology. The standard Islamic narrative takes all of that and gives it a 180, and you are in trouble if you even question that. So it's very, very naughty, but the internet is helping us bring clarity over all of those things.
That's it.
Very cool.
Absolutely. I mean, see, we're getting so much support, as followers of Jesus. We keep finding things that confirm the story that we've been told and continue to tell with great privilege to keep sharing that. It's really incredible. And so this is where I'm going to deal with what I said as part of the thesis is that the Quran celebrates the success and victory and triumph of Christian missionaries. Because as we remember, in the 7th century, there was no division. What mattered was that you were a Trinitarian Christian. So when we actually try to keep this in mind, as we look at the next slide of all these beautiful historical artifacts, keep this in mind. This is Trinitarian Christianity. What we see is that even as far away as China in Siam, we've got the what's called the Nestorian stele, or essentially a commemorative plaque that was built in about struck in about 750 AD or around the mid 8th century, and it's actually celebrating 150 years of the Christianity being in that region of China. So that puts it back in the 7th century, that there are Christian missionaries working and operating as far away as China, and you see this very similar artwork and inscriptions like to the left. It's quite funny. That cube does look like what is it from Mario? There's that rock that just comes down and crushes. But what it's doing is crushing the standard Islamic narrative that there was any that the Quran is referring to Islam. Yeah.
John, I have a question. Are any pieces of this rock missing?
Does not appear to be so. At least not that. Yeah.
Just a funny thought.
Yeah.
Maybe those made their way to Mecca. Just kidding.
Yeah, they probably did. They got inspired. But obviously they got a Temu version. So because the one in that place is very ugly. Definitely does not look as cool as this one, for sure. The OG.
It's very impressive. I'm looking like closer image of it. It's very impressive inscription. It's very beautiful handwriting.
It is, yeah. And the beautiful thing is on the stele on the right, there's actually Aramaic writing as well. So there's definitely these were people who, like, these missionaries were also very knowledgeable and were intellectuals. And I think because there was a book that I read about that went into detail about it, called "The Lost History of Christianity," or Forgotten History of Christianity. It basically shows that part of the success is still the same thing that we're doing today. Is we're promoting education. So when they built monasteries and churches, it became the place where people learned how to read and write, and it really benefited the people. And the really beautiful story about Christianity in China during this period is that the emperor actually nicknamed Christianity. He actually called it the religion of light, or the luminous religion. Such that they really loved Christianity. So, like, it's amazing. So that's just China, but we already know that India had also been reached with the gospel, because there's traditions about the Apostle Thomas reaching South India, what we today call Kerala, and it's very amazing that a lot of quite a few of these Christians in India also speak Aramaic or use Aramaic. So it's very beautiful, and I always thought about this because I don't think it's just that Christianity became a minority. It definitely had a significant following, because you've got to think about it this way. Why would someone go to the effort of building all these churches and monasteries for two people if there was only like a small family that were Christians? Like, it wouldn't make sense to have a whole monastery and build big churches for like 10 people. It just wouldn't make any sense. So clearly, the Quranic community is probably hearing that the gospel's gone to all these places that are beyond imagination, and it's truly been successful, because they wouldn't have just gone only to China to preach the gospel. They would have taken the road. And this is not like today where missionaries would take a plane and go to another country and only go to there. They would actually take the gospel with them as they traveled on the Silk Road. So I believe that a lot of the Stan countries like Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, even Afghanistan, they were all heavily Christianized on their way. On their way as the missionaries traveled and told the gospel along the way and reached China.
There is something interesting when we look at the early sources of people writing about these early Muslims. So John of Damascus says that this person who started everything had got information from an Arian monk, and he's like, okay, so maybe there is a little bit of Arianism. However, there are another thing that I find it quite interesting, that Al-Kindi says that the guy who gave all of this information to the original guy, which he still addresses as Muhammad, although that is a title, it was an Nestorian monk. And he's like, okay, so obviously as we have already covered, the Quran is full of stories from all over, so that's why it's so difficult to actually say here, it was this belief. It's like, no, they take from apocryphal, they take from everything. But we have one source saying an Arian monk, we have another one saying Nestorian. And there is this fun story. I can't remember the source where I read this. When I remember, I'll let you know. Could have been actually Al-Kindi. That in the 7th century, they established a Nestorian church in China. They went all the way there, Nestorians, and they actually created one church over there. And it's like, okay, but there is a similar story in Islam. In Islam, they have the story of, I can't remember how many early Muslims. We're talking in the 620s, that a bunch of Muslims go all the way to China and they actually create a mosque over there, which is surprising because Muslims had not been invented yet. That thing happens much later. When we are in Abdul Malik, there are still Christians and they're Trinitarians. So even though I cannot say, here you go, it was Nestorianism that started the whole thing, it's like, well, that's certainly not the case, because they took stories from all sources and it's very difficult to unpick. But I find it curious that we have this account of the Nestorians creating a church in China, and also early Muslims, but so early that Islam would not have been a thing. I mean, it wasn't until much, much later. So it's making me think that actually Nestorianism, or the influence from Nestorianism, was actually quite strong, but
Yes.
we have to obviously go through the Quran and unpick more and more and more until we can say, okay, these verses here or these surahs, they're actually 100% Nestorian. And these ones here, they're 100%, I don't know, Aryan. And those ones there, they are just pagan or whatever. So I think we need to unpick a lot more. I just find that a very, very curious thing. And anybody who has, for the source about the Muslims going to China, Dan Gibson is the one that actually researched that, I think, into a lot of detail.
Yes.
So you can
Yeah.
see
The
his book
Qibla.
explain
Yeah. Yes.
that.
Yes. Yeah. I think that was so basically, the way I look at it is like all these so-called mosques that are ancient were really churches or synagogues. There's no two ways about it. Because like, why are they facing Jerusalem or Petra? I mean, these are very interesting thing that it's that none of it is facing Saudi Arabia. It's it's very very amazing. Um, but I think with the Quranic text, it's really championing Trinitarian Christianity. There's no two ways about it. Like, and that's the thing about like Nestorius. For whatever way you look at it, like they're finding that basically, the church that he ended up finding refuge in, which was in basically Persia, the Persian Empire. Even Christianity was growing, and it was a very significant part of the Persian Empire. I don't, for one, think that the whole, like they said, that Christianity was like a minority in Iran. I don't think that's true. I think it's really the other way around. I think Zoroastrianism was held by those in power, but that did not make them the majority. It's actually Christianity that was the very big faith in the Persian Empire, because that's how they got the resources to send missionaries as far away as China. How else? Like, if Christianity was hated in Iran, why would they be funding big churches and monasteries? Because that's what the name was, like Yezdegerd III, or like a lot of these Persian kings were very heavily invested in Christianity, such that they wanted to have their own local pope that was to be stationed in significant parts of Iran. So there really is quite a lot going on, and not to mention, of course, Egypt and North Africa and Ethiopia. There really is very heavy Christian presence, and not to mention even as I'm finding that they've actually found like monasteries in like Saudi Arabia, and of course Najran, in all those places. That why would you build a monastery in the middle of the desert if there wasn't a significant population of people who believed? These were centers of education where you'd send like missionaries and teachers. So yeah, this is really one central theme that I believe undergirds the Quranic reflection, because if you think about it, just imagine that. So it's the 7th century. It's reflecting on the past, that Christianity and the followers of Jesus started from a group of 12 or 11, and a very tiny. Who would have ever thought this tiny bunch of misfits in Jerusalem would go forth into all these nations that are far away, like India, China. I really, in that next slide, I know it's blank, but I guess it's, just imagine that, imagine a map of Israel, and then you go as far east, you go to China. There's Christians there. There are people who know who God is, who know Jesus is the Messiah. You travel west. You go all the way to North Africa, to Morocco, to the Western Sahara. There are people who know who Jesus is. You go south as far as you can to Saudi Arabia and Yemen. There are people who know who Jesus is. you go north through Rome and Europe, it's the triumph of these followers of Jesus, these humble followers of Jesus, who were against the temple establishment and the religious authorities in Jerusalem. And who wins when you actually? And this is actually a very important question: who wins? These people who were the authorities of the Jerusalem temple versus the followers of the Messiah Jesus. But post 70 AD, it's very clear who the Quranic text is celebrating. It's celebrating the phenomenal coverage within 500 years of these faithful Christians spreading the gospel and obeying the Great Commission. It's I think it's as clear as day when you think about it. So that there was because I really wanted to put a map with like arrows showing like how the great distance, phenomenal distances that the gospel has gone by the 7th century. Right?
Yeah.
And
so
actually,
basically, from all corners, we would have Portugal at one end, going all the way through Europe, all the way through North Africa, particularly North Africa, all throughout the Middle East, and then actually reaching or spreading into Asia. And we have those things like you just shown, that Christianity was making it even to those corners of the earth. However, then when we look at the standard Islamic narrative of Islam, it says, well, everything in here happened in the Hijaz, where there is no people, where there is no water, where there is no food, but actually they had tons of people, and those people happen to be Jews and pagans. That's all. And it's like, well, first of all, no, because Christians were already all over. But when we go through the traditions, it's just not about the Nasara. It's all about how the Jews are being so mean to Muhammad and they don't accept him and so on. And it's like, no, guys, okay, let's actually get it clear. You actually had the stories about Jesus being rejected by the Jews, and then you took those stories and you used them as your model for your warlord, saying, okay, so the Mahmad, the Messiah, which is the one they had, was denied by whom? By the Jews, and so on. So they have this, mentality of the early Christians and the early Jews having disagreements. That becomes a standard Islamic narrative, saying Muslims having problems with the Jews. And it's like, none of that happened, like literally didn't. I mean, Islam is not really, it doesn't begin to form until many decades after, until we get to probably the Umayyads. So all of that is nothing but fan fiction. And if there was one thing that those people would have known, are the stories of Christianity. That whole story of, no, this is the Hijaz and there is only pagans and Jews, is like, no, it just didn't happen. It's silly. If Christianity was all over, and we know it was very heavily settled even in places like Yemen, and the whole area, well, up to Syria, or actually Turkey, but that's where the Byzantine Empire is. And then the Byzantine Empire takes everything up to Portugal, North Africa, is all over. So this whole narrative of the Muslims having problems with the Jews doesn't make sense. Fan fiction inspired by the Jews rejecting Jesus, they just make it in the Islamic manner. But anyway, those things appear much, much later.
That's right. It's all these. Basically, they're just, the way I treat it is that it's a legend. It's a myth. And it's an interesting point because you're in Spain, I always wondered if what is it? Because in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul keeps talking about wanting to go to Spain to preach the gospel. So I actually reckon that the Apostle Paul did go to Spain, and he was actually martyred after he came back. But that's another topic for its own day. But also, I mean, I won't touch on it in detail now, but I think that this celebrating the success of the Christian church, that actually explains why chapter 18. I think that's probably chapter 18 is related to that. So I'll talk about it later in another episode. But I know it's whetting your appetite, and that's what we're trying to do here. Is this introduction is to really to get everyone excited and to whet their appetite. So, well, this big thing is going to be, we're going to go through chapter 9:31, and we really need to address the elephant in the room in this sense of what does Son of Mary, which is throughout the Quran, and sometimes that's actually the Quranic text. That's how it refers to Jesus as just the Son of Mary. And I think there's actually, going back to that whole thing about polemics, okay, where they were saying that it's a very disrespectful thing to call someone the son of your mother, because it means it's implying, horrible things. But it's actually, that's if you try to take that whole polemics route. But actually, it's something beautiful in the scriptures. You see, the Son of Mary in biblical theology, there is the earliest messianic reference found in Genesis chapter 3. So God was promising Eve, because he is addressing the serpent or the enemy in chapter 3, verse 15. So we'll use the ESV, English Standard Version. So God is speaking, I will put enmity between you, serpent, and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He, singular, shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So there's that clear messianic promise of the seed of a woman, the offspring, the one child of a woman, who will effectively destroy the work of the serpent from the Garden of Eden. And so what we've always been seeing, and it's a well-known fact that Mary or Mariam is the only woman referred by name in the Quranic text, and that's significant because why is it that there's no other female ever named from text but Mary? So then, for the ransom, who fulfills the scripture as the son of Mary, the son of a woman, now we can see a very big implication of that biblical messianic thing in the Quran, the Quranic text. So I think it's an easily overlooked fact, but this cannot be anything but a wake up call to say, look, right here in Genesis, the son of a woman is the ransom. He is the fulfillment of God's promise from the very beginning.
And John, also, when it comes to referring to someone as the son of their mother, it's also this this idea that you only refer to people by their paternal lineage, right? Son of so-and-so and so-and-so, right? But because of this uniqueness of Jesus, that being that he was born of a virgin and therefore has no earthly father, that instead they refer to him as the son of this woman, which is actually, it hints at the virgin birth.
Yes, exactly. That's it. That's the biggest, because usually the typical place for the virgin birth is Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, and that's beautiful. But it's even earlier than that. So perhaps even Isaiah, the prophet, is being inspired because he knows Genesis, the very beginning. So it's like, it's a big, and remember, apocrypha is very brief and abbreviated. So that's a big thing. It's because the Quranic text compared to the Bible is like 1/4 or even 1/5. So it really needs to pack in a lot to deliver as much detail in as minimal words. So by putting the son of Mary is like the messianic ruler that God has promised from the very beginning. So it's big, a big nod.
John, do you think that the name Isa itself is a name or a title?
Yeah, I'm beginning to think it's more of a title, in the same way that, because they say that angels, so malak, is actually a job description, because basically means messenger, and that can refer to anyone. Like a human can be you could use the word malak of a human, but you could also use it of a divine being. So, like, for example, that's where you get the whole thing about cherubim or cherubim, seraphim, like throne guardians, and all these beautiful imagery, because these are all contextual of the ancient Near East.
They're titles that become names.
Yes, correct. Yes, and through tradition have
Sorry, which is also what we see then with the whole this is my current impression, with the whole idea that the Quranic text seems to make malak into a type of species, which is quite unique and actually new. Because before then, I mean, in the modern age, we talk about angels, oh, they have wings and this and that, right? But I mean, you could have these, you could imagine what angels would look like, and you have descriptions and all this kind of stuff. But the traditional view was always that Malak is not a species of creature. Malak is a role, like you were saying. It is that they were sent out by God, like that. The relation of them to God is what's being described there by Malak, right? But the Quranic text seems to use Rasul as the way to use the Hebrew Malak, but at the same time also seems to use Malak. So that's worth looking into. I'm not totally sure if I'm sold on the idea that this was a special species called Malak at the time. But regardless, it would be an example of such a concept where you have a theological term, a title, and then in time, because the meaning of the title gets lost or the theology of the title has to be obscured, then it simply becomes a proper name. And then when someone points out that this proper name is supposed of Jesus, of Isa, the spelling, the orthography, everything is totally foreign. There's no connection with anything else that exists and is attested. So therefore, it cannot possibly be a proper name. So what we're left with is title that became proper name.
Yep, exactly, 100%. And that's the thing is like, so even the rich language about like what is an angel, that all has to come from biblical theology. They can't get it from anywhere else. And at the minute that a Muslim's going to admit that, that's game over for Islam. That's it. It's game over when they have to go to define. They have to come to us to define their terms and define what they're meaning. And I think that's the important thing about context. So context drives the meaning. The meaning is derived from an established scripture and an established tradition that has come before the apocrypha. The apocrypha always relies on scripture and the rich understanding of the symbolic meanings and it relies on that for the true definition. Because otherwise it's too short to spend time defining what's meant by this word and that word. It all has to come from a scriptural tradition, which we're seeing what gives the most coherent, reasonable, and consistent solution is actually Christian biblical theology. So it really is hammering that.
I would like to add to what Kash has said. I totally agree with that. That for people listening to, Isa, son of Mary, that already says, okay, he didn't have an actual physical human, but father, because otherwise you would just call him like that. But also let's remember that the people who wrote this, they have a full creative range to do whatever, or freedom to do whatever they want to do. They can actually say, Isa, son of David. People would understand what that means. It's like, okay, so that means because he would be the Messiah being David and he comes from that line. They could say Jesus, son of Adam. People would understand immediately what it means. So they can say anything that they want to convey the meaning. And they chose specifically to go with son of Mary. And like John said, there is no other woman mentioned in the Quran by name except for Mary. It actually is packed with the information. Virgin birth and typical Christology and all of those things. They could have done anything else. But they actually decided to repeat that a lot. Also, the Quran doesn't say Jesus, son of Mary, like once, and then they forget about it. It keeps repeating that again and again and again. They want people to really understand what is going on. But also then that means that the people listening to those stories, they were familiar with the concept of the virgin birth. Because at no point, or rather you would have to read through the whole thing, if people just heard this story and it's like, well, we follow Jesus, the son of Mary, they will be like, sorry, who is Jesus? Who is Mary? Why are you not talking about the Father? What is going on? They would not understand anything. The people who listened to these stories, they were very, very familiar with the concept of the virgin birth. So, and it is reinforced again and again throughout the book. And the fact that it keeps calling Jesus, the son of Mary, which points to the virgin birth, it indicates exactly what the people writing this book or copying the stories for this book actually believed. It was a central part of the whole story, the virgin birth. So,
and I have one more thing to add before you jump in, John. John, do you recall Isaiah 9:6, where we have the formula of, he will be called blah 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 blah, right? We like,
Yeah.
titles. My
Oh, yeah.
God, as you
God.
were, I shouldn't
Yes.
blah blah scripture, right? But anyway,
Yeah.
this formula of he will be called is then repeated then in the Quran of Mary will be given a pure boy, and he will be
Yes.
called Isa, son of Mary, and then it continues with some interesting stuff that we won't get into. In the context of that, the formula of Isaiah 9:6 and this verse in question in the Quran, I forget the exact reference, they are kind of mirroring of another. They have the same literary style, and hence, if we extrapolate that, it would therefore be akin to say that Isa is his name the way Emmanuel is his name, which means that it's a title.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yep. 100%. And on a side note, what I'll even be able to explain in a later episode is that there's clearly been a significant change in, I guess, the modern understanding of like prophet, for example, for modern Christianity today, and the Christianity that I guess the Quranic community was a part of, because it's like, how do we explain like where it says like Adam and Abraham were prophets and all this sort of thing? Well, the biblical definition does actually explain it better than any Islamic interpretation could ever come up with. There's some very interesting things like it takes for granted that you know what a prophet is. It's like, well, where in the Quran does it ever define what is a prophet or prophesier is? So there's a lot of things that can only be uncovered through with certainty, with more certainty, using the scriptural narrative. So that's a very big thing. But yeah, I have to look into that Isaiah 9:6. That's beautiful, and how that's it gets mirrored. But that's Well, I guess when we look in the text that we have, which is definitely one of my favorites next to chapter 355, is chapter 9:31, and it's are we ready to bust the age-old myth that the Quran is Unitarian in any sense? Because it definitely has to be Trinitarian, because even historically we don't. It's very rare to have any records of a established church that is only binitarian, that they sort of say Father and Son, and the Holy Spirit is some force or something like that. But there's like almost zero evidence of any Christian binitarians. That would have been a very rare breed. But but this next passage really blows the it's like a 12-gauge shotgun to this myth that the Quran is in the Quranic text assumes a Unitarian position, because as it says here, they took their rabbis and their monks as lords apart. And so here's where it starts: from Allah plus the Messiah, son of Mary. So clearly it says Messiah, son of Mary, and they were not. So these people that are doing this, they were not commanded except to serve one deity. There is no deity except He. So clearly, what it's saying is like these rabbis and monks should not be thought of as should not receive worship as Lord apart from God and the Messiah, son of Mary. Specifically, not just any Messiah, the Messiah, the son of Mary, who is the promised one. So there's really no other way of looking at it other than saying that they are, as we can see scripturally, it makes sense from a Christian point of view, where Jesus says, "I and the Father are one." It's very interesting, because it's like, who is this they? Clearly, it's addressing a specific group, and it's and in the context of the 7th century, although Trinitarian Christianity was the mainstream, there were still groups, small sects and cults here and there floating around, and there was a strong sense of expecting a Messiah. So someone would say they believed in the Messiah, and they'll say, "Okay, who is the Messiah?" They'll go, "Oh, no, not the son of Mary. No, we believe that So, for example, if I were in Jerusalem, I'd be like, oh, I believe the Messiah is actually Nehemiah ben Hushiel, for example, or Simon bar Hokbah in was it the second century? You know, the Quran is aware that there are different groups who have different messiahs, and not to be fooled. You must worship God and the Messiah, Son of Mary, because he said, I and the Father are one, and I am the light of the world, whoever follows me. And that's interesting because it follows in the next verse, they will to extinguish the light of Allah by their mouths. I mean, that's a weird saying. How do you use your mouth to extinguish God's light? Well, Jesus is the light of the world, and it even starts in John chapter 1 about Jesus being the Word who is with God, the Word who is God, and Jesus is the light and life of every every human. So it's I think you have to. I mean, it's begging to have an explanation coming from the Gospels, and this is clear John or Johannine theology right here. Like you can't escape it. Yeah.
Right. So this verse actually is one of my favorites. There is a big problem in there, because that formula of Allah wal Masih, you cannot say that in Arabic. They would get very, very upset if you do that, because that is actually associating with Allah. They would have to separate them. You can say, okay, well, blah, 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 Allah, and actually also blah, blah, blah. But you cannot say Allah and the Messiah. That is a big, big no-no. When you look at
very
the
big.
International, they will, I think it is Taif International who says they have taken their rabbis and their monks as lords apart from Allah, and then dash space and also the Messiah. And it's like, yeah, you're confusing the whole thing. You have to make sure that you don't let Muslims see that you are actually associating Allah with the Messiah. Also, all of these keywords that you have actually selected there from the Bible, they are perfect, because they are actually putting Allah plus the Messiah, Allah wal Masih. So, and then it says, but they have to serve one deity. And what you have there is exactly that, almost word for word. I and the Father, which is two, are one. What do we have up there? Allah wal Masih, they are two, and you serve one deity. It's like, yes, it's still the same thing. It's just telling the same story, yes, changing something. And about taking their monks and the rabbis as lords, you can actually, that is probably just a beautiful way to actually say people are really, really just listening blindly to their rabbis, to their monks, but what they need to do is to make sure that they actually follow Allah wal Masih. And you know that by reading the book. That's what you need to follow. You don't follow what a rabbi or a monk tells you, because maybe they are wrong or maybe they are false. You
I have a
follow
question.
exactly
Oh,
what it
yes,
says.
absolutely.
Does the Lord in the verse refer, is it plural or singular explicitly in the Arabic? Do we know?
Let me have a look. Because
it would be different, right? Because if it says that you should only take who you should take as lords would be weird, right? Because then you're implying that you have two lords, Allah and the Messiah. So my intuition is that it's actually phrased such that they take as Lord their rabbis and monks instead of the singular Lord of Allah wal Masih, which would then again be back to the Father and I are one.
Yep, and I think there's also something very rich which is going to carry on into other episodes. It's like what it means, what it obviously is against is that these rabbis and their monks presumably are interpreting the scriptures in such a way and teaching it in such a way that it denies the Messiah, not just any Messiah, the Messiah, Son of Mary, as the fulfillment. So these people are clearly knowledgeable people who know how to use the scripture, and not dumb people. But it's like in your face. Like you're trying to take the Hebrew scriptures and say it's not about Jesus. Well, you're in for some big trouble, because you're commanded to serve God and His Messiah as the one deity. And the funny thing is, it's like people get so like there's these Dawagandists, these Muslim apologists. Okay, they get so it's all Arabic. It's they really want to push the Arabic language. But as Rob Christian has once said, that the rules for Arabic is that when two people are mentioned or multiple people are mentioned, it's the last person that actually wins. So let's just say I said, JC and Cash and John, he was a rich and handsome man, and then I, because I'm mentioned last, I get I get all the credit. So when there's multiple people mentioned, it's an Arabic rule that the last person actually gets the attributes. So it really works against for them to claim you've got to use Arabic rules. Well, it flies in their face. That this one clearly the one deity is a compound one, not a singular one, and if they wanted to insist that, well then it's talking about the Messiah, son of Mary. But that's the difference in the hermeneutic. If you want to take an assumption of Unitarianism, it just doesn't work. It's incoherent. Because how can there be two suddenly becoming one?
You have to read around. You have to read into the text, obviously. You have to come with your bias.
Proof text. Yes.
Yeah.
How two can become one? Yeah, that's Tawhid, man. That's
it. Yeah. Tawhid, exactly. That's it. Tawhid, indeed. But yes, so thank you for it's been a great doesn't even feel like 2 hours have gone past, hey brothers. But you know what? I'm gonna be really spiffy. So it's we've all heard of that movie called Apocalypse Now. Well, no, if the Quran is Apocrypha now, and in the seventh, and when we look at the 7th century AD, we look at it contextually. Who's being revered in these historical artifacts? It's clearly, it's clearly the Messiah that's being the crucified and risen Messiah who reigns. That's who the Quran is truly celebrating and revering.
I will actually add that. Well, even to this day, Muslims, and they will say, obviously falsely, no, we do believe in Jesus, and it's all about Jesus, but he was not crucified. So it's like, no, you are just getting a very different story. But all of these things, imagine that was the original belief. We really believe in Jesus and Moses and everybody else. We just don't believe in the crucifixion. So all of these images, they would have probably depictions of Jesus, fair enough, but they would not have the cross. The fact that the cross is everywhere, it really says that these people at that point, they were still strong believers in the crucifixion and the resurrection and the power of the cross. Otherwise, they would not be depicting that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and exactly, and so we got to really bin the standard Islamic narrative and say we can't just stop there. We have to go. We need to replace it with something that will make sense, and it's the standard Christian narrative, the standard biblical narrative that makes the most sense, and provides the most coherency and the best explanations for things that the Quran takes for granted. Like that classic thing where it says, "Oh, we believe in all the prophets and we don't make distinctions between them." Well, actually, the biblical hermeneutic makes the best sense of that statement, which we will get to later. So these are like really cool things.
That particular verse that you mentioned, it appears actually twice in the Quran, but I really like it. It's Surah 2, verse 136, where they actually mention by name Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and Jesus. Is there any prophet missing from the list?
A good, at least 20.
No,
so many.
But the thing is, it's the Book of Islam, and that line is supposed to say how they represent their beliefs. And you have all of these, basically the all-star, the big ones. And there is one that should definitely be there. The story of Muhammad had not been invented yet. It actually mentions everyone from Abraham to Jesus, and then they stop. It's like,
if I recall correctly, JC, the verse actually goes all the way up until Moses and Isa, and then says, and the prophets, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, that's a big point.
It's also a problem because the prophets come before Jesus, right?
It doesn't say like that, Cash. We've discussed this. It actually changes topic. It's saying Moses and Jesus and what was given to the prophets from their Lord. So there is more to unpick.
Oh, is it a different verse then? Okay, I'm thinking of the verse that goes Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and then it continues, and says, and to Musa, and to Isa, and to the Nabiyun. That's the verse I'm thinking of. It may have been the confusion.
So it's
there are the fact that in all of these verses, when it's talking, just think about it, it's talking about all of these prophets and all of this, and he's like, yes, but this is supposed to be the book of Islam. If there is one guy that is going to be in there, it's Muhammad. It has to be by force, and they all seem to be missing the most important person in this narrative, which is, I think it really gives the game away as well by saying, yeah, his story was not invented yet. Well, strictly speaking, Muhammad was in those verses as Muhammad, as Jesus, but that's going on a tangent.
100%. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I hope this was very interesting. And well, the next topic I want to bring through. So we won't go through the methodology again. Now we're just going to be doing basically going straight to the text and really bridging it together. So coming up next is exactly that. So Isa bin Maryam, the Messiah like Moses. And then the bonus is going to be in that episode, the elephant in the room. So how do we make sense of that chapter 4157 in the biblical blueprint? And it's stay tuned.
Okay, so next time we're going to actually address the Mahmud in the room.
Oh,
that's
yes.
a little Islamic joke right there.
The Mahmud, yes. Oh, yes.
Well, I think
definitely.
this was very good introduction to actually show, like I had said at the beginning, that we have a lot of stories that they have been borrowed from the Talmud, from apocryphal stories, legends, the whole thing. It's like, okay. And then we're looking at other stories, like we've seen in those couple of verses, that are actually showing, yes, it was all about Christology, and also why we had as well in an earlier slide where it says it kept confirming that both the Torah and the Injil, they were fine, and they were doing that for a reason, because that's what you had to follow, because that would fulfill the story, not only in the Torah, but then in the Injil. That was the belief of the people who wrote these stories. They gathered everything around, but Jesus was the central person in that story. Otherwise, before you said, John, if somebody said, God, and I believe in God and his Messiah. It's like, but if you don't have any context, that could mean something else. It could mean that there was a guy who claimed to be the Messiah ben David, and it's more of a Jewish view of that text. However, when we look at the Quran, it really keeps talking about Isa again and again, son of Mary, virgin birth, miracles, and it's like, okay, so when then you put all of those things together, believing in God and his Messiah is part of the Christian view, as opposed to having a very different view, and Allah and his Messiah could mean something else. It really is the Christian understanding of those words.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's and it's all about bringing the coherency back into the Quranic text. There's got to be a way to see it in a way that's both coherent and consistent. That's the key thing. It's got to be consistent because
I have a little thought to add
Yeah.
regarding the whole elephant thing. So I know this is referencing the Mahmud, the elephant who then is brought as an idol or whatnot by the Ethiopians, and so on and so forth. I can see how a Jewish court would come up with the polemic of the elephant. What I mean by that is, what does an elephant do? It spouts water. It has a water trunk. And if people are saying things like, we are saved by the water that gushed forth from Christ's body, it's like, all right, you're God elephant guy who saved you by spouting liquid. Like this I can see this kind of polemic happening. That's totally speculative, just my gut feeling. I want to, just add that.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. There's got to be an explanation for that, because I mean, from what I think, I don't think the Bible doesn't even talk about elephants from what I've heard. So
right, so there has to be some kind of justification why this would pop up, right? It's not random.
Yes,
it's chosen.
No,
right?
No, and it's clearly got to be symbolic of something, because that's there's a lot of symbolism in that's part of the tradition of how the scriptures are read. So
Well,
it says, yeah.
so we will address the elephant in the room in the future, and we will actually look into the Syriac. This is Kash and I, to see actually if there's an elephant in the Quran or there isn't an elephant, because we have to explore every single thing that sticks out a little bit. Maybe it's another title for Jesus in some way, and or
Yes.
something odd like that. But when there is something that you
Yeah.
wouldn't expect to find there, like the mention of a random elephant in the book, and
Yes.
also it's not an elephant, it's the elephant. It's like everybody knows that elephant, but in order to know about it,
Oh.
you have to go outside of the Quran. You have to go to the tafsirs, and we know how what is the purpose of those. But anyway, so those we will.
I have to get it off my chest. Another idea would just simply be elephant because of size. In terms of sacrificing animals, nothing comes even close to the probably new finding and new discovery of the elephants, because they were not in the Levant, right? So maybe because the elephant has to be introduced from Ethiopia, right? Basically, like where are the elephants coming from, and just in terms of people's understanding of what exists. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Or it's what is it? It's an elephant from from Middle Earth, the Lord of the Rings. It's an elephant.
Time traveling.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
You know.
Cool.
Yeah, we see where Tolkien actually got a lot of his inspiration. Well, anyway, this has been a fantastic show, John. I think it's been a really great introduction as to what is going to happen with the next shows that you have prepared, which is going to be focusing on, let's look at the Quran and let's unpick it and understand it based on the stuff that they were familiar with from the Bible, or the things that they may have even copied outright from the Bible, looking at those parallels like you have shown there in Surah 9, verse 31, with Allah and the Messiah, which is not something that is allowed in the Islamic doctrine. You cannot do that. It's naughty, naughty, naughty. And yet we go to the Bible and we have something very, very similar to that, that actually clarifies the meaning of that verse. So that was actually great. I look forward to having other shows and planning those with you and recording them and so on. So, but I think now we have gone for nearly 2.5 hours. So I'll let you guys to actually get off your chest whatever you have to, and then we can call it a day.
Well, excellent. Here I was thinking it's going to take half an hour, but wow, it's yeah. But I hope, but you know what? I hope that that the people who watch this for the first time as well will be intrigued and will want to do more further investigation. And please be what do you call it? The essential ingredient is getting the Murad translation. So please go buy the translation. It really does help him with his projects, because I'll let you in on something. He said that if he has 1,000 purchases, that's when he's going to start, like, for sure, working on an Aramaic translation, and that's going to be the key thing there. But also, I hope the methodology also was coherent, because we're going to take this for granted. So next time, we're just going to go straight in the text, and then uncovering that. And if you're also very new, then definitely go check out those people we've acknowledged, like Fanda Films, and really do that. Go in that wormhole and really see that there's historical inconsistencies with the Islamic narrative, because we're doing this to show the evidence and not come up with the conclusion. We want you to see for yourself. Yeah. And the Messiah reigns forever.
Hallelujah. Well, on my side, I'll just add that I thought this was a good way of, like, a palate, a taster. And it's all just the tip of the iceberg is the thing. That we have such this massive textual collection, and we're only just getting started, guys. Like, this work, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? By Lulling, Luxembourg, and all these people who really pushed the envelope. And I agree with you, we should all buy Saint Murad's translation, if nothing else than simply rewarding a man who was brave and diligent enough to put the work in to provide us this resource, and we should thank him for that. So even if you have access to the Murad for one way or another, just buy another copy and reward this great man for his contributions. So anyway, we have this massive undertaking, so we're just trying to, like, wet your palate a little bit, get some things interesting. Whatever you think is the bottom of the iceberg, it's not the bottom. We're miles from it. So yeah, this is a collective effort. We hope to then eventually get to what you're talking about, the Aramaic translation, or this eventual final rendering. That way we can hand it out to a Muslim and say, hey, I know how to read your book. Here you go. Read it for the first time in 1,200 years.
That's it. Yep.
Great. And what I will say is that when I started doing a lot of this research, there are a few things that I actually I found out, and I was so happy, yay, this is incredible. And then I do more research, and other people have actually found that out before me, as it was to be expected. And but there is not a unified place where people can go and say, okay, now I know, now I'm up to speed. Normally, in order to learn all of these things, you will have to go and say consume the content of 100 different people to be pretty much up to date. So one of the things that we're trying to do here as well is trying to bring everything to one place, particularly when it comes to the Quran. Not so much about the history or the or those things, but the actual Quran. So every time that people actually find something, hopefully we can actually bring them as well on the show. They show it, and at least we can make this one stop to finding things about the Quran. Hence why the channel is called Quranic Inquisition as opposed to Islamic Inquisition or something like that. We try to actually focus on that. But anyway, I think this has been a very good show. So thank you everybody for watching. It's been great having you around. And Kash, always a pleasure. So looking forward to having the next session on Thursday. John, well done on your very first show. We look forward to actually having you back as soon as you have the next set of slides ready. So let's discuss that in a minute. And for now, everyone who has been here, thank you very much for watching. Make sure that you like the stream and share and do all of those YouTube things. And we will see you soon, hopefully on Thursday. Until then, have a good time, and God bless you all. Thank you, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, see ya.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie! 26 different Quran!
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go and read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
As promised, I will give you more than 20 reasons why I left Islam in this video.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this Injil?